Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the introductory webinar for our virtual regional trade mission to Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, with a focus on green building solutions. Today, we will hear about opportunities for green building solutions in the three very exciting markets, and also the opportunities for UK companies to participate in the upcoming virtual regional trade mission, which also includes business matching in these respective markets. My name is Phoebe Nonis, Senior Manager for Trade Services from the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, better known as BMCC, and I will be your MC for today. We are delighted to have with us here the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, His Excellency Charles Hay, to give his opening remarks. With that, I would like to invite His Excellency to give his speech.
Phoebe, thank you very much for that introduction, and a good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all participants. And it's a real pleasure for me to join you for this really important milestone of our ASEAN Low Carbon Energy Programme initiative, Green Building Solutions Regional Virtual Trade Mission to Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Now, I'd particularly like to welcome our speakers, who you're going to hear from a bit later on. Eloise Burnett, Senior Asia Manager from the Carbon Trust. Bryce Richard, Strategy and Insight Regional Lead for Australia from Arup. Alex Tate, Head of Technical Practice at the Royal Institute of British Architects. And Valentino Das, who's the Country Head for Malaysia from UK Export Finance. And I'm very grateful for the active involvement of the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, the BMCC, as the main organiser. They're a terrific partner for us here in Malaysia and absolutely essential to everything that we're trying to achieve. And also I'd like to welcome our counterparts from across the region, British Chambers of Commerce and British Embassies from Thailand and Vietnam. And all of us have worked together very harmoniously and closely in the development of this trade mission. And a warm welcome too to all participants in this introductory webinar for the mission. Since 2016, the UK government has supported 6 countries in ASEAN, including Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, through our ASEAN Low Carbon Energy Programme. And through this programme, the UK provides technical assistance in renewable energy policy, pilot projects, commercial project preparation and bankability, stakeholder coordination, and green finance, all of which are essential. Now, this is a particularly important time because last week we saw the culmination of COP26, Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, which was a significant milestone in our struggle to combat climate change. The UK took over as President Designate of COP26 2 years ago. And of course, the COP26 was meant to be held last year, but had to be delayed because of COVID. But at that time, 2 years ago, less than 30% of the world economy was covered by net zero or carbon neutral commitments. Now, that did include the UK. We were one of the first economies to legislate for a net zero goal. But things have changed. There's been a real turnaround, and now 80% of world GDP is covered by carbon neutral or net zero commitments. Newly joined to this group, of course, is Malaysia, with the very welcome announcement of a net zero carbon neutral goal announced by the Prime Minister in the context of the 12th Malaysia Plan just a few weeks ago. Cities are absolutely critical in the struggle against climate change. More and more people live in urban environments, and they face challenges of good health, accessible transport, and affordable housing. And I'm delighted that 2 Malaysian local authorities, Kuala Lumpur itself and Hang Tuah Jaya in Malacca, have joined the Cities Race to Zero campaign, and I'd urge more to do so. Malaysia's also released the Green Technology Master Plan 2017 to 2030, and that incorporates green technologies into planned development across Malaysia. It's got 4 main pillars: energy, environment, economy, and social. And with the outcome of COP26 in mind, implementation, of course, is now the key to meeting our net zero and other climate and environment commitments. Net zero by 2050 is also the commitment of Vietnam, as stated by Vietnam's Prime Minister in his speech at COP26. Vietnam is one of the countries most hard hit by climate change, and it's aiming to build its resilient economic development with targets by 2030 of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 9% with domestic resources and by 27% with international support. Likewise, in Thailand, the Prime Minister attended the World Leaders Summit at COP26, announcing Thailand's accelerated greenhouse gas mitigation targets. On this occasion, the Prime Minister emphasised that Thailand has put climate change as a top priority and presented Thailand's active efforts to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 and net zero greenhouse gas emissions by or before 2065 to urgently tackle this issue, as Thailand is one of the top 10 countries in the world most affected by climate change. In addition, Thailand is setting a pathway towards an environmentally friendly economic development, and that will be the main agenda for APEC next year during the Thai chairmanship. So today, our outstanding keynote speakers will walk you through what I think will be a comprehensive journey of the UK's approach in responding to the climate emergency and in achieving sustainable outcomes. Our speakers will cover the energy efficiency services opportunities in Southeast Asia, plus practical experience of a UK enterprise with years of experience working in the ASEAN region. So with this, I'd like to encourage and invite UK companies providing green building solutions to use Malaysia as a gateway to the markets in Thailand and Vietnam. The application link to the next phase of direct business matchmaking with local stakeholders across 3 markets has now gone live. So please apply via the link provided in the chat box or contact the BMCC for more information on this mission. I look forward to hearing about the impact you will create in your businesses from this trade mission, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That was a wonderful introduction to our webinar. Coming up, we have 4 very interesting presentations for you. Here is our agenda for today. We encourage you to ask questions in the Q&A box instead of in the chat box. Please also state which speaker your question is for, and we will attempt to answer your questions if time permits. Our first speaker is Ms. Eloise Burnett from the Carbon Trust. Here's some background on Eloise. She is the Senior Asia Manager, and she manages the operation and delivery of the Carbon Trust portfolio across Asia for both corporate and public sector clients. Eloise has over 10 years of experience in climate change mitigation and specializes in the design and delivery of world-leading climate change programs. She currently leads the energy efficiency delivery of UK government's ASEAN Low Carbon Energy Program, working across the region with governments and private sector to drive the transition to cleaner energy. Eloise spent the last few years setting up Carbon Trust's Singapore office. Eloise will be presenting on opportunities in energy efficiency services in the Southeast Asia region. Eloise, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Phoebe, and thank you everybody for joining us today. So yes, as Phoebe mentioned, I work very closely with clients across Southeast Asia and Asia on the topic of energy efficiency. So today I will give an overview of what we're seeing and what I'm seeing in my day-to-day life on the trends of energy efficiency markets. What are the key indicators in Southeast Asia, and why is this a really good market and a good time to be exploring opportunities in Southeast Asia? So just quickly to introduce Carbon Trust, we have been around for about 20 years, and we are a UK organisation with a truly global reach. As Phoebe mentioned, I've spent the last 2 years in Southeast Asia setting up our Singapore office. Our drive is to accelerate the mission to net zero. We are a mission-driven organisation, and so we spend our days working with governments and private sector to find ways to support them in that transition and that move to net zero. So like I say, I'm going to have a look at the energy efficiency opportunity, and obviously as a mission-driven organisation, Carbon Trust looks at the full scope of what it's going to take to move to a low-carbon economy or a net zero economy. So where do we see energy efficiency in the bigger picture? Well, of course, climate scientists are continually modelling and refining pathways to drop to 1.5 scenarios. And the energy efficiency opportunity is going to and has to play a really core part in that, in all scenarios. And it could lead to really trillions of dollars of savings if energy efficiency is deployed as it should be. In the International Energy Agency's scenarios, I find this fact really interesting, that in their modelling of the last couple of years, they found that 38% of global emissions reductions need to come from energy efficiency. And that compares to a 32% amount from renewable energy, which I think is really a really interesting pointer to how important energy efficiency is in that metric of carbon reductions. But the key puzzle piece is that there needs to be a huge amount more of activity, investment, expertise growth, and finance channeled into energy efficiency projects. And of course, ASEAN are working on it. I'll go into a bit more detail about what the ASEAN level targets are and what the ASEAN nations are focusing on. So why do we think energy efficiency is a growth market in Southeast Asia? So what we always say at Carbon Trust is it is the first fuel. Energy efficiency is the first fuel. Before you are exploring those renewable energy options to meet your energy demand, have you concentrated at that first stage at reducing that demand, looking at your footprint, trying to find a way to reduce that demand in itself? But that being said, why is it a growth market in Southeast Asia? Well, consumer demand, of course. We are seeing corporates being pushed by their customer base towards more sustainable futures, and that's across all basis, whether you are an original equipment manufacturer or you're a construction worker building and designing buildings. The demand is coming from every angle. Of course, international agreements, as the High Commissioner mentioned, never has that been more topical after COP26. National determined contributions from every country are going to have to make that shift and be a bit more ambitious. And the more efficient use of electricity is key to the growth puzzle. The more efficient use of fuel is key to the growth puzzle. How do we decouple the idea of economic growth from the idea of an increased in carbon footprint? And of course, the ASEAN Centre for Energy in this region is working very hard on those areas too. There is that strong business case, the undeniable effect of reducing energy costs on your profits and losses. And that business case for energy efficiency is getting stronger and stronger with the price volatility of energy happening and continuing to happen. And then looking at a national level, there is a lot more happening on the national level for policy levers. So whether they're national plans or individual incentives or even fines and kind of rules and regulations against kind of poor energy practice happening at a national level more and more. And then finally, of course, green finance. The growth of green finance has been huge in the last 3 years. Having worked in this industry for 10 years, it's been a definite step change in the last 2 to 3 years, where finance is really focusing on trying to look for green projects. And of course, an energy efficiency project can be classified and is classified universally as one of those green projects. So in terms of the green building opportunity in Southeast Asia, the stats and trends for green buildings are clear. We are in the global picture. The final energy consumption, nearly 40% of total in indirect CO2 emissions come from buildings. But we're seeing that in ASEAN, energy efficiency and green buildings are making economic sense, and there is increased customer demand. But that is also contributing to the ASEAN level targets. They have an aspirational target to reduce energy intensity. So the intensity of your use of energy by 32% by 2025. And within the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Corporations, so that document that really guides the ASEAN nations on their practice and where they should be going with their energy policy and plans, two of the key pillars in that document relate to buildings. So the strength and sustainability of energy efficiency in buildings, and looking at enhancing ESCOs and clusters for energy efficiency and conservation promotion. So it is a focus area for the region. Next slide, please. In that Carbon Trust, we have seen such a change in the last few years around energy efficiency finance, and we see bringing more finance to energy efficiency as a key enabler, allowing more public and private finance to be rooted into energy efficiency projects, and therefore creating a stronger pipeline for energy efficiency projects. So we have really been focusing on this area over the last couple of years. What have we been doing? Well, it's about doing a lot of training. So tackling that knowledge gap on energy efficiency across finances and beyond. So ensuring that there is awareness on what energy efficiency means, what the impact can be, what the revenue stream looks like, and therefore opening up that market for more energy efficiency projects. Alongside that, we have been working on introducing tools to build that confidence. What are the things that are going to demystify energy efficiency for those people who will end up financing the opportunity? And that's some things that allow to verify the business model, such as technology lists, where you create a list of valid products and services that are that can be counted as energy efficient or green to be part of that energy efficiency project. And then, of course, it's the projects themselves as well, strengthening the business case, building the business model, creating case studies, and that we can promote around the region to prove that this is the opportunity that they can be focusing on. And then, of course, looking at de-risking these projects. So even if these first three items are happening, ensuring that the risk levels of energy efficiency are perceived to be lower or allowed to be lower, therefore becoming more an attractive investment. And we do a bit of that through things like guarantees and energy saving insurance. And hopefully what we are doing with this activity is really opening up the market, allowing the energy efficiency project pipeline to be strengthened and pulled forward. So what are we seeing in the specific markets that we're focusing on today? What are the indicators that show that energy efficiency in buildings is a priority and this is a growth market? So we'll just be quickly touch on each of the three markets, building on the High Commissioner's words, really focusing a bit more on the buildings and green building environment. Next slide, please. So in Vietnam, of course, we have our Vietnam Energy Efficiency Program. That is the kind of main driver for energy efficiency action in Vietnam. We're seeing they have a target to reduce 8 to 10% of national energy consumption between 2019 and 2030. And we have recently seen an energy efficiency building code being revised. And that building code provides mandatory technical standards to achieve energy efficiency in buildings. And also within a new build and retrofit. There is also a real push in Vietnam for smart city strategies with urban green growth development plans feeding into their national urban development plans, led by multiple funders and donors, which have been leading into these regenerated green city and green urban plans. They have green building ratings, which are on a growth trajectory, obviously affected by COVID, but I'm sure they will recover as the economy in Vietnam recovers. And a key organization in Vietnam is the Vietnam Green Building Council. So for Malaysia, really for us, we really see Malaysia as a kind of leading light in energy efficiency in the region. They have their energy efficiency action plan targets, which are looking at just electricity consumption by 8% reduction by 8% over 2026 to 2025. But to support an energy efficiency market, they really do have a very relatively developed ESCO market with a concentration on pushing energy performance certificates. And there is a real proven skill set to carry out EE projects in Malaysia. They have a green building target, which is one of the only countries in ASEAN that does, and several established certification schemes. Interestingly, there is also financing schemes available to EE projects, which is really encouraging, including ones which allow fund energy performance contracting for ESCOs, specifically for the building sector. There's also some green tech funding for producers and users of green tech. There's also conditional grants for energy audits. So these things are really allowing more businesses and more companies to consider and then implement green projects. So really opening up the market for green technologies. And of course, they have green bonds and green sukuks as well coming through, which are again a real driver of this field. So yeah, Malaysia's a really good opportunity. And then finally, Thailand. Yeah, I think again, Thailand have been working on this for many years, and really lots of indicators coming through that this is a good market. Some energy they have their energy intensity target of 30% by 2037, and I'm sure these will all be updated and revised alongside the national level changes with their targets alongside the COP26 developments. They have got the requirement for higher energy using buildings to have a person in charge of energy usage, and they do report annually to the central government. So yeah, that is enforced, and so monitoring equipment is a real growth area in Thailand. Also, they also have fiscal incentives, ESCO fund that allowed that channel private investments into EE projects, and some two very established certification schemes for green building, including LEED and TREES. So that's everything from me. I hope I've provided a bit of an overview of what the growing EE market is in Southeast Asia and some of the indicators of growth. Do please get in touch if you have any other questions, but I will hand back to Phoebe to continue the program. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Eloise, for that excellent presentation. Now, moving on to our next session, we are delighted to have with us today Mr. Bryce Richard from Arup. Bryce is the Strategy and Insights Regional Lead for Arup Australasia. He's an economist and strategy consultant with over 16 years of work experience in management, technology, and sustainability consulting. Prior to Arup, Bryce worked as a public policy advisor for the World Bank and the IFC, where he advised 60+ municipalities on economic development, policy reforms, and digital transformation. As the head of global strategy for Samsung, he also shaped the company's corporate strategy and led smart city projects in Korea and abroad. Today, Bryce will be sharing the practical experience of a UK company working on green building in the Southeast Asia region. Over to you, Bryce.
Thanks, everybody. I just want to make sure, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for confirming, Fee. You made a very good presentation. I don't have anything to add to that. Thank you for the introduction. So I'll spend a bit of time adding to what Eloise in very good and extensive presentation has already presented. And I'll just highlight a couple of particular points that come more from our experience working in Southeast Asia, particularly in the areas of smart cities and smart buildings, and the opportunities related to these areas, particularly for British companies with relevant services and skills. So just a quick presentation for those who don't know us. So Arup is a global engineering and design firm, but we have been involved increasingly at an advisory level through our strategy practice, which is a global network of strategy consultants, economists who have been advising really senior executives and government officials on the whole range of urban and environmental strategic issues. And a lot of this include as well like energy efficiencies and decarbonizations, climate change adaptation, mitigation, all of these topics, circular economy as well. And so we've had the opportunity to engage with public sector and private sector on these topics globally, but increasingly across Southeast Asia. And a lot of the topics that we have done recently is really to explore two topics that I'll talk with you today. First, we've had the opportunity to work with DIT on really making an assessment of smart city development in Southeast Asia. And smart city is, of course, broader than smart buildings, but there is, of course, huge overlap. And what it means for British companies trying to enter the markets, these lessons actually can be across, right? So I'll spend a bit of time on that. And the second part I really wanted to talk with you is we've been doing for various clients, technology clients interested in entering the Southeast Asia market in various countries there, an assessment of the demand for energy efficiency and cooling technologies as part of smart building projects across Southeast Asia. And we learned a couple insights as well that we'll just share with you today and hear your thoughts and questions. Just one quick comment. So when we talk about smart cities, especially in Southeast Asia, a lot of people are talking about smart cities in very different ways around the world. But essentially in Southeast Asia, they tend to be very driven by what I would call a commercial model of smart cities, which is really smart city projects or smart district projects or smart building projects that are basically led by private sector, private developers, usually within the confines of mixed-use developments or premium office buildings or commercial commercial properties, with the idea of actually going, higher up the value chain and providing higher or charging higher rent to tenant, or providing, you could say, differentiated experiences for residents. So it's very much a premium play in Southeast Asia increasingly. And there's quite, that leads to a lot of very specific demands in terms of what developers or building owners are basically asking for when they're asking for smart building technologies, right? Because it's really linked to what they're trying to achieve. So part of the work that we've done is really getting a deeper look of smart cities in Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, and I'll share with you today a couple of the insights from there. And of course, as you know, I mean, smart city is a quite broad concept that includes mobility and planning, of course, environment and climate management, which is very much what occupies us today. At a city level, it can be as well like technologies that do environmental monitoring, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, when we're talking about climate change mitigation, notably, we're also talking, and actually adaptation as well, we're also talking about a lot of smart building and infrastructure technologies. There is a whole range of other smart city solutions and services, which I will not go into today, but you could say those are some of those that are more of interest to you guys. And you'll see in the couple slides, there is the plethora of very interesting opportunities that have been popping up in these countries, and that call for the installation and maintenance of these technologies. I won't go into this one. There you go. And part of the, sorry, a bit of a delay. Part of the engagement that we've done was indeed to talk to a lot of governments and real estate developers in terms of best practices that they see from the UK and how the UK is being perceived by these different clients. And it's going to be part of a couple of the insight later, but it is very clear that the UK is being seen as a huge provider of expertise when it comes to key technologies and and technology-related services by the different countries that we've seen. But not only expertise in the technology and expertise, but in technologies in all the different elements around the technologies, that is providers of the right standards, of the right procurement models and implementation, the right financing approaches. And we'll see a little bit later, it can be one of the elements that the UK can indeed and UK companies can always put forward as they approach clients and propose their solutions and expertise. So as I mentioned to you, we've seen a huge boom of smart city and smart building and basically urban technology related projects in Southeast Asia. Most of the countries that we've surveyed have had extensive progress in terms of setting up smart cities framework, digital technology implementation plan, have been putting a lot of investment behind it. And so right now, something that started with, as I mentioned to you a little bit earlier, as really private sector driven initially through premium project that some of the major corporations in these countries are actually driving, are now being caught up by a renewed interest and renewed push by governments themselves that are now trying to rationalize things and putting together plan and putting together public money in order to intensify the push and drive further investment into the country. So these opportunities for all of you guys means that it's really keeps on increasing. That has been really popping up quite a lot in the last 5 years, and in the next 10 is bound to keep on increasing. So the main finding that we got from our foray into smart city in the region, particularly in Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, is that there is a huge amount of, as I mentioned to you, opportunities. I think we've inventoried more than 300 or 400 projects in smart city happening across these countries in the last 5 years and currently going on. But we've even highlighted as part of the report that we've published along with DIT, a whole range of current or upcoming opportunities across the 3 countries that you survey, Vietnam, Philippines, and Malaysia. And as you can see, a lot of them are indeed private sector led, but a lot of them are public sector led, right? Which means that there's quite a lot of opportunity for technology providers. And what's interesting is a lot of these projects tended to be initially very transportation and mobility in nature, because congestion in Southeast Asia is one of the critical issues, and a lot of government actually invested heavily in doing that. But what we've seen recently is actually the emergence of projects around other topics that are quite interesting. A lot of them basically are related to what we're talking about, like topics around climate resilience, talking about renewable energy and smart grid, talking about smart infrastructure management. And so there is a lot of topics around indeed the topics that are of interest to us, that is energy management, building automation, infrastructure, real-time maintenance, life cycle management. All of these things are starting to pop up in an increased way. So there is a diversification of money, both public and private, that used to be very, you could say, smart office related or smart transport related, that is now starting to diversify and looking for a whole range of new projects, which is quite interesting. So we've seen that diversification. And now, as part of the project, a lot of the questions that were being asked by global companies and British companies specifically in this case was, there's a lot of competitions in this market, notably by Chinese players, Japanese players, Korean players, American players that are basically coming in and capturing a lot of these opportunities. What is really the value proposition of UK companies trying to enter these markets, and what is the best way to position ourselves? And through extensive engagement with clients, as well as understanding what is really the strength of the key winners of projects right now that are happening in this particular sphere, we kind of came up with a couple of you could say high-level findings and recommendations that really show what companies that win these projects tend to display in terms of main assets. So one is a lot of the companies that are quite successful have a good network of local partners and partnership, and really well-established network of trust with local and national governments, which really usually requires a bit of presence on the ground, a bit of time being spent, and being able to really leverage the networks of local influences that exist, right? Either through Bridgecham or anybody else. There's quite a huge premium in staying power and being there and investing and actually being there. So we've seen that quite a lot. Of course, cost competitiveness is a huge element in the country, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the cheapest is always winning. It means that whenever there is an opportunity to engage with a client, the return on a particular investment and helping the client really understand the value that is being created, or the monetization opportunities or the savings opportunities, needs to be very, very, very crisp in order to avoid really capex driven type of thinking and to look at it more from the perspective of return on investment. And the companies that have been very good at articulating the value being created for the clients have usually managed to penetrate even very cost conscious market. Then after that, there is always the issue of funding and financing, because here you're talking to clients that are always, being very mindful of the cost, not only the capex and the opex of complex technologies, and are looking for funding partners and financing partners, right? So a lot of technology companies that we see win quite well usually come with innovative ways of funding and financing their technologies, be it new business models, or coming with investors willing to play a constructive role. So that's quite an interesting bit as well to know. A lot of players actually coming with a significant diplomatic relationship, and that's really the case of, for example, like Chinese players, Japanese players, and Korean players. They come usually with the backing of the government, who can propose ways to de-risk, for example, certain types of risky technologies, or provide funding mechanism. And it's quite important indeed for UK companies to understand what is the weight and influence that coming together with like a UK Inc. type of approach could actually have in unlocking access to market. And then the final element, which is very, very strong, is indeed the element of what is the brand and value proposition, and understanding really where the UK stands in terms of the premium of expertise, the premium of quality, of long-term life expectancy of technologies, of ability to not only help on the deployment, but as well on creating a whole range of enabling environment around these key technologies, is really what's standing the UK apart, right? And that it's not really going to be something that all countries will be able to put forward, and I think it's really a card that UK companies can play in an increasing manner. So that was part of the smart city element. Now I just wanted to share with you, and I'll be very brief. Phoebe just hit me on the head whenever I'm hitting the 20 minutes. We looked at it as well from a smart building solution and market analysis in 8 countries right now. We're doing it for a couple clients, and 6 of these countries are in Southeast Asia. We're right now finished the analysis of 4 of these countries, and we really looked at elements of smart ventilation and smart HVAC, but also some elements of building automations and BMS. And I'll focus really on the high level findings so that we can go pretty quickly. But what's really clear is, because of COVID, you have a lot of very new drivers in the region, where COVID as well as rising pollution problem has really led to an increase in awareness for indoor air quality types of technologies, as well as a demand for natural, ventilation type of technology. So a lot of technologies around advanced IAQ and environmental quality is really starting to rise in the demand of the clients in the region. and as well anti-pandemic related technologies, which is something that is quite advanced, actually is really coming at the top of mind of even players in Malaysia and Thailand who are really like leapfrogging in terms of that. So it's quite an interesting opportunities for companies that are starting to develop these technologies, that are thinking about it, starting to think about smart building in those terms, right? We've seen as well, because a lot of these countries signed Paris Agreement to phase out harmful refrigerants, we've seen an increase in use of natural refrigerants, and the district cooling is also a technology that has been, you could say, slow in uptaking for a couple of years, but we've seen a huge increase recently, because a lot of the efficiencies are starting to make it worldwide, worthwhile at a small scale, and you have a lot of mixed-use development in the region that have sufficient scale to actually make this type of technology worthwhile. So that's been quite interesting to see that. We've seen a lot of innovation or demand for key features such as energy efficiency that has been like important throughout Southeast Asia, but something that we've seen is really an increase in demand on topics of control, that is the ability to control at the building, tenant, and individual level, planetary health, especially in the use of natural refrigerants, as well as occupant health. IEQ is really something that has been, as I mentioned to you, increasing quite a bit, and topics around increased life expectancy of the assets, and better integration of technologies as part of like digital twins and BIM. This better process tends to be a bit more advanced in advanced economy like Singapore and Australia, but a couple of countries in the region are actually starting to catch up. I'll go a bit more quickly. As I mentioned to you, air quality monitoring is really a critical function that is starting to be asked as part of broader smart building solutions. And as well, what we've seen is when you look at it from a integrated management of buildings, what we see is a lot of clients are actually starting to ask for a BMS to be integrated with renewable energy system. That really shows like a very interesting rising demand for building level renewable energy management, which is something that we quite didn't see a couple of years ago, particularly in Southeast Asia. I won't go necessarily into this one. And Eloise did a fantastic job at providing like the regulatory context a little bit earlier, so I'll be very brief here. But what's been quite interesting is, of course, you've had quite a few global level kind of standards and certificates that have been really used by a lot of companies as mostly from a marketing standpoint, saying, okay, I have LEED certification, etc., etc. But what we've seen, which is quite interesting, is the emergence of local level standards that mirror global level standards, but with elements of contextualization, such as trees, right? And that's a very interesting thing, because it really means that a lot of countries are starting to, in Southeast Asia, are really starting to pay a lot of attention to it and taking this very, very seriously. And especially a lot of these tools, actually, they used to be voluntary mostly, but they're starting to be incorporated more and more into regulations, and they're trying to be incorporated as part of national construction codes or industries codes of practice, which really shows that now we're moving towards a more an enforcement-led use of sustainability guidelines that will drive a lot of demand for smart building related and environmental related technologies as enforcement actually grows. And I think I'm reaching the end of my time, so I won't go too much into it. What was interesting is a lot of providers of technologies, especially in the brownfield environment, are starting to provide more energy as a service and cooling as a service type of models that are starting to pick up in the region, which is something that is very new, and it's actually something that is picking up even in, you could say, emerging economies and emerging markets. And so that is definitely an evolution that is quite interesting for companies that are coming with innovative business model as part of like building optimization type of services. Right. So it was a bit, a bit of a scattergun approach to a couple of the insights that we have, but hopefully there's a couple ideas in there that you found interesting, and happy to answer any questions you might have around that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bryce, for your thoughtful presentation. Next, we also have with us today, Mr. Alex Tate, Head of Technical Practice from the Royal Institute of British Architects, also known as RIBA. Alex is responsible for professional and technical support, developing guidance, and building relationships across the construction industry. He oversees RIBA guidance for members on project and practice management. He also provides support on technical issues, including insurance, procurement, building safety, and sustainable development. Alex manages the RIBA Plan of Work and the RIBA 2030 Climate Challenge. He works closely with experts from across the profession and the wider construction industry and represents RIBA on a variety of industry and standards bodies. Without further delay, I would like to invite Alex to share the UK expertise for green building solutions. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Phoebe, and thanks for our other speakers. Really great insight. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to do a very kind of quick whistle-stop tour of our 2030 Climate Challenge and some related issues. I think it's UK specific. We have created for the UK market, but I think it is quite applicable anywhere, though there might be tweaks that might need to be made to specific target areas. I will just rush us through. So this is why we're here, obviously. We have our massively growing annual fossil fuel emissions, and though the coronavirus forced us to expend less, we pretty much caught back, and though the research of that is not totally complete yet, we're likely to be back on exactly the same track as we were before. And 40% of those emissions come from the built environment, from the construction process too. So our approach is taking the UN Sustainable Development Goals, so they're very, very wide, applicable to anything almost. In 2016, I think we signed up to the UN Global Compact, and therefore we're supposed to place these at the heart of everything that we do. So we're taking that quite seriously. But what we're doing for buildings is identifying those goals that pretty much every building can contribute to or cause problems for. And for those, we've then slightly reworded when necessary to make them more applicable to our industry, and so that we can easily talk to everybody involved without them having to worry about the global nature of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, so they can see their part in it. Each of those we've identified core metrics for, so that we could set targets when necessary, and existing challenges and those voluntary measures that Bryce was talking about. And most of those have a kind of an international flavor, or are international in their creation in the first place. So we're using these. We've developed kind of core guidance to our sustainable outcomes guide and approaches to take in the design process. But we've also embedded that into our main project management, design management process tool, the RFA Plan of Work. So this goes to all stages in a project. It's used across every building project in the UK and has quite wide reaching internationally. We've used those same goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and our version of them, and we've provided more detailed guidance in each of these stages. The core tasks that we think project teams need to undertake to ensure that these areas are embedded into the project and considered in a whole life sense, and that we plan properly for the way we're going to be using buildings, and we track our risk performance, and we undertake evaluation at the end. So the 2030 Climate Challenge is all about setting targets, and we've set those in operational energy, embodied carbon, water use, and we have some health and well-being ones. And the reason for this is primarily because we can talk about products, and we can see products, say that this product will meet this energy efficiency target. So this is a light bulb from the EU market, but it's pretty similar right across the globe. And I've got some examples of some Southeast Asian approaches to energy marking for products. So they're repeat products. They work as they say they should, and you know that they're going to meet the requirements, the ratings. Buildings, however, don't. Here is an example of a collection of buildings. Each of these vertical grey lines is a building's energy use, actual energy use rather than designed energy use. This is a piece of research undertaken by the Better Buildings Partnership, which is a collection of the largest commercial developers in the UK. And this shows that the regulatory approach, those same A, B, C, and onwards colours, there's no correlation whatsoever between real life and that regulatory approach. So each of these, in fact, I think F is the highest average performing rating. So our regulatory approach just doesn't work. We're not getting what we want from it, but we can do better. So this is just to show the regulatory model just misses a whole load of energy use. But we can definitely fix that by undertaking more rigorous energy modeling processes. So this is an example of an office block, but it could be a residential building. So TM54 is a Chartered Institute Building Services Engineer standard for office energy modeling, but this could be passive house, international passive house approach. So it's a more rigorous process, so we can get a lot more accurate in energy. So that's our starting point for energy. We also have the same kind of problem in whole life carbon. In fact, whole life carbon as a concept for the construction industry is pretty new compared with operational energy. We've been trying to do operational energy really, really thoroughly for about 30 years, and we still aren't there yet. And we're very new at whole life carbon. It was like a kind of cutting edge research not very long ago. And now it's trying to break its way into the rest of the construction industry. So we've worked with other bodies to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. Because it's quite a new area, we all talk about it slightly differently. So our goal in the UK is to try and make sure that everyone's talking about it the same way. And we're following international standards to make that work. Making sure that when we talk about whole life carbon, we all know what we mean. Same with embodied carbon or upfront. So that up till the completion of a building, handing over to a client, that upfront carbon needs to be balanced against the rest of that embodied and operational carbon, and potentially any reuse carbon benefit from the circular economy at the end. Here's an example of that same problem. So upfront carbon emissions and by parts of the building, the building systems and services, and then a whole life approach. And it's a totally different weightings when you consider the whole life. So there's a huge balancing exercise that needs to be undertaken, and as early as possible in the design process. So these are the pushes that we're making. And we have then set targets. We've worked with the construction industry to make sure we've got what we believe are tough but deliverable targets for buildings. We have a 2025 and a 2030, but our challenge is all about getting to a decent level by 2030. And then, of course, to whatever we might term net zero. We can't be totally carbon, we can't be totally carbon negative in the construction process, though we of course can offset. We need to lower as much as possible. So we've set targets for offices, as I said, in energy, embodied carbon and water consumption. We have a kind of a business as usual. So what is currently about average right now, we have targets of 2025 and targets of 2030. And it's likely that we'll tweak these every year based on data that we are collecting and others are collecting. So offices, schools, and we worked with our demand for education to make sure that we have appropriate targets that would match up with their quite ambitious requirements in their later procurement process. And then the same thing for residential buildings. Now, this one's a bit more tricky because this is any kind of residential building. This could be an individual house or a major refurbishment of a house, right the way through to a massive development. But we think they're still widely applicable, and they are very tough. But this is where we have to be, because if we don't, we won't meet our global and national targets. So what we have also seen is we've got our own members have been working on embodied carbon calculation tools. So here's an example of one that's a plugin into Revit by a practice called Hawkins Brown. And then we have a more simplistic but slightly more applicable to our challenge version from Field and Clay Bradley Studios, which is just an Excel spreadsheet, but it's a pretty rigorous one. as a way to track embodied carbon and whole life carbon decision making. To go with that, we're now working with the rest of the UK construction industry on a built environment carbon database so that we can build the evidence necessary to persuade government that we need to set tougher regulatory requirements, and we need to start regulating whole life carbon as part of our building regulations, and in use operational energy too, not just designed. And to show the kind of my last slide here, because I only have a few minutes, this is a recently published trajectory for the UK market, carbon spend per year up to 2050, showing a massive drop and as fast as possible, picking up a few key large projects or whole swathes of refurbishment of existing building stock, and then key interventions that government will need to implement to make us get there. But our approach is to get industry to get behind voluntary targets first and push those, and we start tracking their progress, building that evidence base of whole life carbon decision making and the results, so that we can use that to drive better targets. So it's likely that we'll have to redo their targets again based on this brand new model to make sure that it is 1.5 degrees max climate change proof. So I'll stop there and pass back to Phoebe to introduce our last speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for your insightful presentation. And last but not least, we have Mr. Valentino Vignesh Das, Country Head for Malaysia for UK Export Finance, to provide a briefing on UK export finance and their offering for green infrastructure. Valentino is based at the British High Commission in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and he has over 10 years experience working with international financial institutions such as HSBC and Standard Chartered, where he was in various client-facing roles. Prior to joining UK Export Finance, he led the group treasury function of a regional healthcare provider with presence across Southeast Asia. Valentino, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Phoebe, for that wonderful introduction. And Alex, that was a wonderful presentation, very detailed one, in fact. So thank you for that. A warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for your time today. I'm excited to be here today to speak to you about UK export finance. A quick introduction of myself. I think Phoebe has given a very good introduction, so won't spend more time on that. At UKEF, we are playing our part to tackle climate change and aligning ourselves with the UK government to tackle the whole environmental and global warming issue, which is a top priority for us. Climate change is at the heart of UKEF, and we have committed to going carbon neutral by 2050, ahead of COP26. This means that UKEF will increase its support for green exports in various sectors and UK supply chain. This means that there will be more opportunities for UK companies to tap and participate in potential green sectors projects globally. Before we start, I would like to share a brief overview of the area that I'll be covering in my presentation today. I'll start off by introducing UK Export Finance, what we do and who we are. Then I'll share a little bit on the clean growth in terms of eligible projects that UKEF supports. Finally, I'll be wrapping up with key contexts which may be useful for you to get in touch with, which are our export finance managers who are based out of the UK, and as well as our international network, if you so decide to explore into different markets in Southeast Asia or globally. UK Export Finance has been around for more than 100 years. We are part of the UK government department. One of the key essence of UK Export Finance is that we complement and not compete with the private sector. We typically support UK businesses that export, and we do offer several products, which is in the areas of risk mitigation, which is our export insurance policy, as well as buyer finance and working capital products. We've also secured a couple of accolades to be known as the most innovative ECA. UKEF can support various sectors and sizes. The only industry at the moment that we are unable to support is in the oil and gas sector. However, we can support the transitioning aspect of the oil and gas sector, moving to cleaner fuels. In 2020 to 2021, we've issued 3 times more export insurance policies than in the previous year. This goes to show that with the support of this insurance policy, UK SMEs could continue to export and weather the tough conditions that we had over the last 1 year as a result of the COVID pandemic. Over 160 UK SMEs have benefited from this program in relation to the export insurance policy. We do offer and avail our guarantee to financial institutions abroad and in the UK to support banking facilities availed to them for eligible projects. For overseas buyers, such guarantees can be made available in local currency, which is something that is quite attractive and a differentiator among other ECAs worldwide. In the last year, we've provided more than 12 billion in terms of support for UK exports. We've directly supported more than 500 UK businesses, and estimated jobs that we've supported in the UK is more than 100,000. UKEF will pursue a focus alignment strategy along with the SDG goals that have been set. So we are taking a proactive approach in identifying projects and supply chain that have an impact directly in relation to SDG. So, and as you, for the topic today, green building is certainly an area that we do support. In 2020, UKEF, we managed to double our exposure in terms of sustainable projects. And this amounted to about 10% of the amount of value we have supported, amounting to about 2.4 billion sterling pounds in 2020. This has brought us, in terms of ranking in the global league table of export credit agencies, to number 2 worldwide. Now I'd like to move into a bit of our products. So essentially, we are our UKS support basically is split into 2 categories. We do have support for UK exporters, which is available onshore, and as well as for overseas buyers. In terms of where I sit is more of support for our overseas buyers. And in London, in UK, we do have our export finance managers who are able to support for the requirement that you would have on the ground. Typical products that we have are around the insurance and working capital. And this is to provide sort of like a risk mitigation in terms of non-payment when you're dealing with overseas buyers, help you to raise bonds for your preliminary stage of bid bonds, performance bonds, as well as working capital. For overseas buyers that you are talking to, we are able to support the overseas buyers by providing them attractive financing terms in the form of guarantees with the banks that they're discussing. And basically this is to help them procure from the UK, which indirectly is helping UK exporters sell. So basically, in terms of application for our overseas buyers, typically these are the information they would need in terms of what are the project scope, the borrower or the guarantor that is involved, the planned UK content, in terms of value currency of the contract. This will also be useful for you in terms of when you are dealing with a potential export project before approaching our export finance managers. If you have some of this information, it would be useful. We do also organize supplier fair models. One of the key purpose of this is basically bringing UK exporters like yourself, UK businesses, to introduce them to potential overseas buyers or companies. We do these forums, these sessions at least twice a year, but due to COVID, we've sort of like scaled down. Our upcoming event is on the 7th of December. If any one of you are around the London area and would like to attend, I will share the flyer with Phoebe, and I think she can use it to circulate later on if you're interested. Just to share with you a case study on the topic of green building, where UKEF has supported. One of the case studies is on the Bihar Green Headquarters, which is based in Sharjah, UAE. With 25% of the project was delivered by UK companies, including the design, engineering, and smart office services. The amount of the value of this project was around 30 million sterling pounds. With the support of UKEF, it enabled them to complete the headquarters. It's an award-winning environmental management company in the UAE. The new building will be entirely powered by renewable energy generated from its solar panels, as well as a waste-to-energy system. And it's supposed to be one of the most sophisticated smart offices in the world. I just wanted to share with you a live case study that we have done earlier this year, and this is one of them in relation to green building. In terms of our contact points in the UK, this is our list of export finance managers and the network. They are pretty well spread out within the UK. So depending on which location you are based at, these are the personnel that you can get in touch with. In terms of our international network, we are a growing network, and we are based, there's 15 of us worldwide at the moment. So if you do want to reach out to specific countries, feel free. Happy to share the contacts for the respective countries. Your export finance manager will also be able to link you up once you've established that initial contact. So we've come to the end of my presentation, and before I bid farewell, I just wanted to do a quick recap. I shared with you about UK Export Finance, what we do and how we can support, the type of products we offer for yourself, UK exporters, as well as what's available to overseas buyers. This is useful when you are in discussion with them on a commercial discussion and into what is available for them as well. I've shared with you also the contact point that is available for you to access on. Thank you for your time today, and I hope you found the session useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentino, for the very informative presentation. Before we move on to the Q&A session, please allow me to share a little information on the upcoming virtual regional trade mission to Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. I wanted to share with you the dates for the mission. We are visiting Thailand first from 21st to 25th February and having one-to-one meetings with stakeholders, all virtual. And on 28th February to 4th March, there will be a virtual visit to Malaysia, followed by a visit to Vietnam from 7th to 11th of March in 2022. Now, if you're a UK company that is providing green building solutions, you're invited to register your interest, and we will make a selection of all the applications that come in. The deadline is the 1st of December. And please also do submit a PowerPoint presentation along with your application form. The registration link will be also shared in the chat box. Here's the registration link, or you can also scan the QR code. And of course, if you have any questions, please do let me know. The mission is actually free to attend. It's basically open to UK companies, and it's subsidized by the UK government. So we look forward to your applications soon. Thank you. Now we'll go on to the Q&A session of this webinar. We have a question for Bryce. As the interest has been renewed with effort from the governments, what are one or two biggest focuses other than smart homes, specifically for Vietnam?
Thank you. That's a really good question. So a lot of the increase in the interest that we've seen is around a couple of topics, actually. So one is we've seen quite a bit around waste management and drainage, linked as well to climate resilience. So a lot of topics around really circularity, a lot of topics around infrastructure resilience, around coastal adaptation. We see a huge increase in demand on those topics. And it's quite interesting because it really means that commitments to climate change or the fight against climate change is not solely focused on climate mitigation, but is starting to include some huge elements around climate adaptation, which actually is happening not only at the infrastructure level, but as well at the building level. And so we've seen increased demand in terms of heat resistant and flood resistant infrastructures in buildings that we simply didn't see a couple of years ago. We see a lot as well around more front-facing type of demand, notably in terms of education technologies and e-commerce and digital payment that might be a bit beyond the smart building component or the environmental component that we're talking about, but I'm answering your question from that perspective. And we do see a lot of elements that are more in the back end of these systems. That is, huge focus around cybersecurity technologies, because now we are talking indeed about like smart building and energy management and BMS and all and the full stack, but there is really a huge interest in full spectrum cybersecurity, and that's really something that the UK is really strong in, and that a lot of people are turning to the UK to actually provide answers and technologies and expertise around. That, and as well like strengthening open data systems. That is, how do you manage to create integrated data networks at the building level, at the district level, but even potentially at the city level. And so data governance and data management are really the type of skills, expertise and systems that we've seen really popping up in Southeast Asia, and as you were mentioning, in Vietnam quite a bit.
Thank you, Bryce. Hope that answers the question. We have a next question. It's from Deepa. I believe this is for Alex. Energy targets for buildings will vary with European figures. Do you have figures available for Southeast Asia in line with net zero targets? Plus, please provide recording. Okay, we're going to do that anyway. Thank you.
I'm afraid I don't, but the best place to start is the World Green Building Council. And then I know that Malaysia and Vietnam have their own green building councils. I don't think Thailand has yet, but I assume it will soon because most countries will. We work closely with the UK Green Building Council to make sure that what we're doing matches up with their kind of target setting work and their trajectory. So that's the kind of the starting point. I think the targets we've set are still they're broadly applicable. Certainly the whole life carbon side. Energy will be much more variable, but if you look at kind of how the targets are going, they're really going as narrow and as small as possible. And at that point, then it makes very little difference across different nations. But I'm afraid, yes, I'm sorry, I don't have any specific detail. It's the kind of thing that we're interested in trying to explore, but they have to be country specific because you need to be looking at what the country's own national targets are, regulatory or otherwise.
Yeah, just to add to that, I would say that they currently would not be aligned to net zero, with the countries in question only really announcing or kind of aligning themselves verbally to net zero at this time. I think it's going to take a bit of time to work out what that looks like for green buildings, to ensure that any targets set are aligned with net zero, and there'll have to be some investigation and analysis done. So I imagine it will take a few years before the filter down comes from kind of national level down to sector level net zero baselines or metrics that we can say are net zero aligned with confidence.
Thank you, Eloise and Alex. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. This is basically to the panel in general. Jim says, thank you for the presentations. Mitigation and building approximately for the future is all well and very desirable. But here and now and for the next 30 years, safety and survival are paramount,
as the global climate ramps up further. Despite its overriding importance, the word weather was not mentioned within the presentations. What opportunities are there for companies such as mine, British Weather Services, to educate, train, monitor, and warn populations and contractors of the impacts of severe, debilitating, and catastrophic weather events? Who would like to take this question?
Well, I'll start, and hopefully others will chip in. Absolutely, yeah. I didn't go into much detail about our kind of health metrics, but we've got a serious driver on avoiding overheating, which is clearly a weather-related issue. And this is not just the UK. Obviously, this is everywhere. So we've been trying to push for organization for the construction industry to not just concentrate solely on the improvement for energy efficiency and whole life carbon, but also to consider the unintended consequences when design decisions can sometimes go awry and leave occupants in unsatisfactory conditions. So there's a really detailed modeling, and our approach is starting wide as early as possible, picking up the core issues, fabric first approach, absolutely, to try and make sure that we're picking up everything we can. I see maybe if somebody else has something else to jump in on there.
Happy to build on what Alex has mentioned. Thanks very much, Alex. So as mentioned, I think in a previous answer, climate change adaptation in Southeast Asia has been top of mind of several countries for quite a while now. I mean, Indonesia has been really investing a lot in flood management for a while. KL is probably one of the biggest success stories in terms of flash flood management and technology. And so the cost of extreme weather events in the region is so massive that government has basically reckoned the importance of dealing with it for quite a while now. I feel there is a huge opportunity, Jim, for what you're talking about in terms of how to provide additional expertise in dealing with extreme weather event more than the traditional way of just like building flood tunnels, for example, and having, like, I would assume, integrated end-to-end management that include not only the technology part, but as well, training the right people and maybe training the population and upskilling as well, like weather services and emergency response people. I would assume that there is a whole approach to disaster management that I think would be fundamentally not only disaster management, but disaster prevention, and basically the whole cycle of resilience is of huge demand. I know Singapore is kind of leading the charge because they're quite well at they're quite good at dealing with that. But there is such a huge demand for this across the region, and not only from the public sector. You have a lot of private actors who basically have assets that are increasingly vulnerable, either because they're located in, like, near coastal areas, or their supply chain are basically potentially disrupted for certain things like this, that also are looking for ways to minimize climate-related risk going forward. So I don't think it's answering your question specifically. I can only say that there is huge demand. It's really a matter of going there with your services and expertise and seeing who is willing to listen. And I think there's quite a few people who would be interested.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next question is from Phil. What are the current waste management opportunities across the 3 countries? They're seeking technology circular economic solutions for waste hires. Who best to connect with to discuss our solutions? I would say, Phil, reach out to your British Chambers of Commerce in each respective markets, as they would be able to assist you accordingly. But I'm not sure, do any of the speakers like to add to that?
I mean, I can speak about the level of sophistication of circularity in the region, because we've been looking at it. it's still very much, the concept of circularity in the region is still very much in progress, because a lot of, even the first level of waste management, which would be recycling, is still very much like an upward slope to climb, right? And so really going into full circularity cycles is a conversation that is starting to happen. It's starting to happen mostly in the manufacturing sector, from our conversation, especially in areas such as electronics or plastics recycling, because there's so much conversation around it that there is a bit of a gravity around these topics, and there is as well multilateral money like IFC World Bank that is actually going into that, and that is actually incentivizing government to start paying attention. But I think when you're talking about like waste tire, which I assume you're talking about like processes like granulation that would turn like tires into new forms of asphalt, I think you're pushing the boundaries. I think it's something that is quite advanced in Europe, and through EPR systems, etc., etc. But whether it's something that is catching on in Southeast Asia, Phoebe is right to say you probably would be the pioneer in trying to push the idea forward and see if there is any traction there.
Thank you, Bryce. Go ahead.
Thanks, Phoebe. Just to add to that, I think if you need a port of contact, I think you can also reach out to the Department of International Trade within the British High Commission or the Chambers of Commerce as well, because they would have contact points in the markets that you may be interested to explore this opportunity.
Thanks, Valentino. We have another question here from Hassan. Is there interest for hydrogen-based renewable energy systems or interest in this region?
I can say a few words on that, Phoebe. I think as with hydrogen globally, there is a lot of work going on to understand its potential in many different sectors. And I think that Southeast Asia is not going to be left behind on this one. And when you have nations such as Singapore, which are so energy intensive when it comes to shipping and also so highly reliant on natural gas, their move to hydrogen is on the horizon, and they're interested, and they have research centers and programs looking at the potential for hydrogen in Singapore. In terms of how that filters down into different markets, I think it will be a longer term bet rather than a short term. I think there will be, for definitely Southeast Asian countries, if you're looking at beyond and the application beyond shipping, it's not going to be a thing that's going to be moving particularly quickly, I don't think. But that's my bet. I mean, I'm not I don't know if anyone wants to counteract me there. It might be that it becomes some sort of there might be some smaller technologies that are going to advance very quickly. But my commentary would probably be that would be a longer term perspective for Southeast Asia. I don't know if Alex, you agree with that. And I see some slight nods there.
It's right that we've got this, in the UK, it's still, early research. I know it appears in government white papers as a part of the solution, but I don't think we can deliver. I mean, also hydrogen is smaller molecules, so the whole network is going to be very leaky. So it's not, it's not going to be the thing to fix the problem. Not here, most likely. Not anywhere else either, but it may have a part to play. I agree. Otherwise, it's probably not immediate.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you guys. Singapore is a very unique situation because it's a country that has limited potential for renewable. So their only way out of natural gas is a bit of solar, which is always going to be limited, and hydrogen is a huge bet. Though I think to the question, we would have to differentiate between blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, right? So blue hydrogen would be a big bet for Singapore because it would be part of the natural gas supply chain, whereas green hydrogen is essentially a renewable play. And so to qualify, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think it's easy to say there's interest because there's interest globally. Everybody's excited. Everybody thinks that it's going to be the silver bullet. The question is whether there is indeed meaningful investment going into that. And I think right now everybody is kind of looking for probably a couple leaders, notably like the UK, who are going to make like major investment in terms of infrastructure or setting like global supply chains for hydrogen to finally hit the price where it's going to be like commercially viable. And I think this is one of the things where Southeast Asia is probably going to be looking at as a kind of a follower rather than a leader when it comes to that. I don't know whether you guys agree. That's kind of how we see it so far.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we have time for one final question. This one's for Bryce. What is your final piece of advice for UK companies who are working in the green building solutions supply chain and who are keen on exploring opportunities in Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, apart from joining the trade mission, of course?
I think it's linked to one of the slides I showed a little bit earlier in terms of what I think is important. I think it's very difficult to enter this market by doing a bit of kind of like a lullaby approach where you kind of like landing on the market and then after that leaving. That is, you do a visit for 2 weeks and then you're hoping that you're going to get a contract. I do think that a lot of the successful companies actually establish a presence first and a local network first. And that's an investment that might take 6 months or a year and a half, but that really pays off. It's not a matter of having a huge office of like 25 people, but sometimes 1 or 2 people who are there, who understand the market, who can bring the right connections, who understand what's going on, is probably one of the first steps on top of, as you mentioned, you were mentioning, reaching out to UK representative on the ground. So I'd say that would be a first important step if it's not already undertaken.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Bryce. Well, we've reached the end of our webinar. I would say thank you so much to our esteemed speakers for your valuable insights. Thank you also to the audience for your attendance and for your questions today. We hope we've answered all your questions. We also hope you will join us again for our upcoming webinar tomorrow, conducting effective and professional internal investigations. Please visit our website, www.bmcc.org.my, for registration information. Our appreciation also goes to our partner, the British High Commission in Kuala Lumpur, and the British Chambers of Commerce and British Embassies in Thailand and Vietnam for assisting us to promote the webinar to their networks and for their support. Thank you also to the amazing team at BMCC who have been working behind the scenes to make this happen. Have a great evening. Take care and stay safe.